Hello, Danielle. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to my show today.
Well, thank you, Liz, for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Absolutely. Let's just dive in. I was hoping, can you share a bit about you and how you have personally applied the principles of grit and resilience in your own journey?
Yeah, so I spent the past 15 years in the corporate world. Most recently, I was leading a team for a Fortune 500 company for 7 years, where when I was with the organization, we went through acquisitions and restructuring and downsizing, and in fact, an attempted hostile takeover that made global news because it would have created a monopoly within our industry. So definitely went through trials and tribulations, but I believe that a lot of my grit and resilience stems from my upbringing. And it's because at the early age of 2 years old, I was actually kidnapped from my father by my mother. And so I grew up thinking that my dad had abandoned us, that it was just my mom and I. And it created a lot of this sense of I need to take care of myself. And in a lot of ways, that helped me be very successful. But then in a lot of ways, there's some kind of challenges on how I was showing up and how I looked at what happiness was for a really long time. But since I didn't know the truth about my father, a lot of my grit and resilience was modeled from my mom. My mom was a single mom. When I was 5 years old, she was going to school to get her bachelor's. She was serving as a cocktail server full time, and she had a 5 year old. And she really showed and modeled for me what perseverance and determination and grit was. And I got to see it from her. And then through the own challenges that I had experienced in my personal and professional life, I got to actually apply them. So it's an interesting kind of the background and how sometimes the challenges that we endure and the trials and tribulations that we experience shape us into who we are. And sometimes there's the negative aspects on how it can shape us. But then a lot of times, if we look at what can I learn and grow and how can it shape me into who I want to be tomorrow, there can be a lot of positive results from it as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you're absolutely right that our childhood experiences, we're impressionable and the way that we develop in our way. But what I also find, interesting, and again, thank you for sharing about your experience with, with your mother, and just those childhood experiences. But I can see how that resilience and grit has even paved your career path in empowering others and building that resilience. So that's what I absolutely love when connecting with professionals, and the impact and the work that they're doing today is it really starts from a young age.
It absolutely does. It's interesting because I had no intentions. I had this very successful career in corporate, and I had no intentions of starting a business. And eventually I'll share the story of kind of what led to that. But then now where I'm at, I think back to my childhood, and it's funny because I started my first business when I was 7 years old. When I was 7 years old, my stepbrothers and I would go and we lived in California. We would go and cut down mistletoe from the trees during the holidays, and we would go home and we would bundle them with little red bows, and we would sell them outside the grocery store. And that's how we paid for Christmas presents for each other. And so I kind of look back, and that was where that entrepreneur spirit, that's where this, oh wow, I could actually take something and I can grow it into a business and start to earn money to have the freedom to kind of buy the things that I wanted to buy for my family. And that's really where it started right from the beginning. So it's fun when you look at where you're at today and then reflect back and think about maybe the experiences or events that took place in our life that has led up to the decisions that we've made today.
That's incredible, that you had that entrepreneurial spirit as a kid. And because I know I read a little bit about your background, and can you share about that? Because you have a strong background in sales. And I think you won awards, or you very high achieving salesperson. Don't be modest. But that's interesting how it evolved even from a little kid. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think it evolved the early ages of Girl Scouts and learning to sell Girl Scout cookies, and then obviously, selling mistletoe. But like I said, my mom was a big role model for me. My mom went from, we were living in a small 1-bedroom apartment. We had nothing, and my bed was in the living room of this tiny little apartment. And we went from that to, my mom became a region manager in one of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in the world. And she was a leader, a manager as a female in the 1990s, wasn't as common as it is today. There's been a lot of evolution. And so I saw what was possible. And I admired my mom in a lot of ways in that sense. And so I followed her footsteps. I loved sales. I was in high school working full time. I did retail sales. I just enjoyed, I didn't think of it as I'm selling something. I took it in as I get to help somebody, whether it was I worked in retail and they would come in and I would help style them and they would walk away more confident, or if it was I was helping provide a solution and helping taking a medical practice to digital with digital imaging or practice management software. But I spent 15 years in medical sales. My first job was when I was 23 years old. I wasn't even old enough to rent a car, and I was working for this big medical company. And within 5 years, I had earned 4 consecutive President's Award, which is awarded to the top 10% sales reps. So I got to go on these lavish vacations that were paid, which was amazing. And then when I was a leader for the Fortune 500 company, my team had earned the #1 team, so region manager of the year, when I was leadership for the Fortune 500 company.
That's amazing. And I knew I had read that about you. I'm like, I definitely want to ask her about, some of those achievements. And when you talked about your childhood, I thought, okay, I need to ask. This is the perfect time to ask that question, because I think it's great that you credit your mom. Like you said, you had that as a role model, but you also have those strengths and gifts within you that you've been able to, leverage throughout your career. But now you've entered a different chapter in your life, and based on your experiences and your own personal resilience and grit, and living that, living toward fulfilling within living a fulfilling life. um you now have this book, right, that
Mhm.
I know will be released next year. You mentioned it was in pre-launch. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your messaging behind this book. So in your book, you talk about the 5 R's about resilience and living a fulfilling life. Can you give us a little glimpse of one of those R's today?
Yeah. So, what inspired writing the book was a very pivotal moment in my life. Many of us in 2020 experienced change. 2020 was a year for all of us experiencing change. What I experienced was my life completely flipped upside down. Within a 6-month period, my husband had returned home from a deployment in Iraq. So he was in Iraq for an entire year, while our twins at the time were between the ages of 1.5 and 2.5 years old. So when he left, they were in cribs. They were learning how to walk. They were still, kind of coming up with their own words. Now he comes back and they're in toddler beds and they're eating on their own and they're talking back at him. And he is going, what is happening here? So we were grateful that he came back and he was home and safe. And at the same time, there was a lot of challenges emotionally in trying to figure out and navigate through him integrating into our rhythm and our routine that we had. And how was he going to be as a parent when he hasn't been here for the past year? How are the kids going to respond to him? So that happened. He came back January 26th. Then March 8th, I lost my mom to suicide.
Oh my goodness.
So in a moment where there was joy that my husband was returning home, I had lost my mom. And while I'm coping and trying to process the emotions of losing my mom in such a tragic way. And I'm about ready to I had booked my plane ticket to go to California to meet with her friends and do the celebration of life, and the pandemic hit. So March 13th, the pandemic hit. I lost my mom March 8th. And there was so much uncertainty around that. So I wasn't even able to have, it's never going to be closure, but I wasn't even able to take that step as to moving a little bit forward with being able to at least honor my mom in her life. And so then that happened. And then a couple months later, the company I had been with for 7 years got acquired by another organization. And it was a very toxic work environment where I ended up leaving the company. People that had been there for 25, 30 years ended up leaving the company. So it was a 6-month period where my life flipped upside down. I had tied so much of who I was to my job title, to my income, to the people that I worked with, that I felt lost. I felt confused. I didn't have a sense of identity anymore. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my self-worth was, because unless I was the Fortune 500 senior sales manager, region manager of the year, without all that, who was I? And that's what inspired writing the book, which was this journey of reflection and self-discovery and redefining success and what it means to me. But more importantly, through the journey and taking all of those years of experience, whether going through challenges personally or professionally, was how can I help others to develop the grit and resilience to achieve their goals, to embrace challenges, and to build a career and life that they love. So that's what inspired the book and the creation of it. Sometimes your pain becomes your purpose and your message. And that's what inspired it.
Again, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry to hear about your mother, especially during that time that everybody's experiencing, again, that uncertainty, those challenges, and to lose a loved one during that time, I can't even begin to imagine. And then, having, even the change with your husband, being deployed and coming back and all that transition. And so I'm curious, how, where did you dig from? How were you able to kind of get through that and that inspiration to even say, okay, now I'm going to write this book, or even just get through that? And I know that's all about
Mhm.
resilience and grit. So can you share, how did you get through that?
Yeah, the first step was reset. And that's one of the R's, is to reset, because I really needed to understand, for me, what did this next phase of my life was going to look like, my career, my personal life, to reset and to redefine what success was going to look like for me. Like I had said, I had tied so much of my success to my career that when I didn't necessarily have it and I was trying to navigate through what that next step was going to be, I I felt like I had lost a portion of myself. So when I say reset, it was I gave myself permission to actually take a break. It was the first time that I had not worked I had never taken more than 2 weeks in between a job. I worked with one company for 5.5 years, another company for a year and a half, another one for 7 years. So I gave myself permission to take a couple months off before looking for a new job, because I wanted to understand, what if I were to pursue a new job, what did I want? What did I enjoy doing? Did I want to get back into a leadership role? Did I not want to get back into a leadership role? What type of company did I want to work for? What were their core values and how did it align with my values? What did I want my lifestyle to look like? I went from a position where I was on a plane every single week. And did I want to continue to do that, or did I want to be home more? And so, and also too, how did I want to show up just as a person? And also understanding that it's not so much about what I do in my career, but what's the legacy that I want to leave behind? And so when I say reset, a lot of times as high achievers, we will go, go, go all the time. And when we hit bumps in the roads, it's this, you've got to push through it. But I don't believe in that. I believe that when we hit challenges and we hit bumps in the road, it's an opportunity to take a pause and to reset, and to reevaluate where we want our next, where we want to be in the future. So I would say that would be the first one. And then another R is to redefine what success looks like for us. Because like I had said, when we were tying it to titles, if we lose it, what happens? And one of the two steps that I took to redefine what success looked like for me was I started to look at less about what I wanted to do, more about who I wanted to be and what was the impact that I wanted to make. And so I went on Facebook, of course, that's the platform that we go to when we want to go through some soul searching. But I had shared if there was 3 ways that three words that you can use to describe me, what would it be? And people started to comment. It was very vulnerable to put it out there. I was a
I'm
little nervous
sure.
to do it. But I had put it out there and I said, if there's 3 words to describe me, what would it be? And people started to post comments, motivating, inspiring, resilient, perseverant, driven, all these words. And that just reading the words helped give me a little bit of boost of confidence in a place where I wasn't feeling confident at that time. It gave me just a little boost that I needed to be like, okay, I can take on one more day. And I took all those words and I took all those words and I wrote an obituary, my own obituary, in the sense of if from a family member's perspective and a colleague's perspective. And I said, I'm going to take these words. And if someone were to stand up, if a colleague or family member were to stand up at my funeral, what would I want them to say? Because that is my gut check in myself. And am I showing up as the person that I want to be and the legacy that I want to leave behind? And that to me is more my definition of success than it is necessarily of what social media puts out of what success is. You can still want nice things. Would I love to have a private jet that flies me around in the world? Absolutely. Would it be? Of course, that would be nice. Would I like to have millions of dollars so I never have to worry about bills? Absolutely. But when I think about what drives me now, it is what drives me to succeed is to be able to provide financially for my family and to be able to provide for others, whether it's doing missionary work, whether it is being able to donate to nonprofit organizations that are close to my heart, but to be more in a service to others and making an impact than it is necessarily all about me. And that was a big shift.
That is, that is a very loaded response with so many nuggets of wisdom that I would love to kind of pick pick at. And what I love what you say is the whole idea of resetting and redefining success. I I think that what you just shared, what will really resonate is when I'm working with clients or colleagues, friends, that they're always talking about things that are changing in their lives, right? Unexpected, unforeseen situations, circumstances, layoffs, whatever the case may be. And like you said, having some of these titles or identities, and so when that's kind of stripped away from you, there's like you feel stuck and lost, and now what? And I think it's so important to step back and reset and really think about what your values are at that moment, in that moment. So I think that is so important to do and assess. And I feel like it's an ongoing process. It's a cycle. Like we never arrive, right, to a destination. It really is about a journey. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you in terms of your book, Unstoppable Grit, the book aims to help readers break free from societal expectations. So you talked about like social media, but defining their own version of success. Can you provide an example of how you guide readers through that process?
Yeah, there is a whole chapter on what redefining success looks like for you. And it starts by breaking down where did we frame the narrative of what success looks like? And it always comes back to our childhood. It's either what our parents have told us what success looks like, or it's what media has told us what success looks like. But in the book, I break down specific and provide specific examples of, let's say, women, for example. There's this perception that is put out there in the movies that success, if you are a successful woman, that you are then aggressive and mean and no one wants to work with you. You've got the successful women that are in this, even down to the cartoons of 101 Dalmatians, Cruella DeVille. There's the woman that is, I'm trying to think of all the examples. There's a bunch of examples that I share in the book where there's these narratives that were created for us. Or as women, we need to be rescued.
Mm.
But is that really, can't you be both? Can't you be why is it a one or the other? Can't I be a kind person like the princesses that are in these movies while also being successful and not being aggressive, but being assertive in what I believe to be when I should be respected and not taken advantage of. I am not this damsel in distress or this aggressive, unwilling, woman that no one wants to work with. And then also the perception of what success looks like on social media. You're only successful if you're flying around in a jet and you're flinging $20 bills like you're going out of style. Yeah, that's great. And those are things that are good to achieve. But I see a lot of these highly successful, wealthy people that have this persona of what they put on the outside. And I know many of them personally, and that's not how they are feeling deep down inside. It's a persona that they put out and not how they are behind the scenes. And so we start to compare ourselves with them and go, well, I'm not happy because I don't have that. In order for me to be happy, I need to have everything that person has. And it creates a false sense of what happiness looks like. It creates a false sense of what success looks like. We get into the comparison trap. And I say, don't compare your step 2 to someone's step 12. That's
right.
one in. And don't ever compare yourself to anybody on social media because you're seeing the good. You're not seeing the behind the scenes of the challenges and what they're going through or what it took to get to the point of where they're at, the sacrifices that they've made. And are you willing to make those same sacrifices? And I say that in the sense of, there was the CEO of the company that I worked for. I remember this conversation, and there's this, always this conversation that we have with our managers. Oh, what's the next step? You got to climb the corporate ladder. That's always what you should be striving for. And I remember the CEO, I had asked him, what do you do in your free time? And he looked at me and he says, I have to be honest. He says, I don't have much free time. I'm on the road 300 days of the year. He was CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, a Fortune 500 company. He says, I don't really have a lot of free time. I don't really have a lot of friends. He says, I don't say that to complain. It's what I chose, but that's kind of my life. And I said, that's not the life that I want. So that's okay. I don't need to strive to climb the corporate ladder because that may not be the lifestyle that I want.
Absolutely. And I think, in thinking about success, I feel like I have these conversations constantly with, again, with my clients, but also my students, when they have these goals. I work with college students and they're thinking like, I need to make a lot of money. I need to have that great title, this lucrative career. And I think having these self-reflection types of exercises and really thinking, again, I go back to that reset. I love that you have that as one of your R's, and really redefining, because it looks great on the outside, but you don't really know what's behind it. And to really recognize what are the things that you value, right? So if it's family, being able to spend time with family, if it's traveling, if you have a job that pays all of the, great income, but you can never actually step out of your city or travel the world, is that something that you truly value? So really thinking about what it means to you, ultimately being happy and fulfilled. And I think what does, really hold a lot of people back is that what you mentioned, that comparison. That's a challenge for a lot of people, I feel.
It's a still challenge for me. I will say I talk about it, and I would say I still sometimes struggle with it. It's just because I have confidence, I will say there's still periods of time where I don't. The difference is I have the self-awareness to quickly identify when I am comparing myself to somebody else, and I have the tools to change it. So in the book, one of the tools that I talk about is change the remote control, especially with social media. Because if you are finding that you are watching social media and you're starting to be like, oh, I wish I had that. I wish I had that car, or that boat, or that lifestyle, or traveling to there. And you start to get into that I wish, that is creating depression deep down inside.
Mm.
It is creating a feeling of left out, lost, disconnected. And so when I find those moments where I'm kind of feeling off, there's something I'm feeling a little not at a moment where I'm like completely happy with where my life's at, I will say, where can I take the remote control and take control of my life? I'll go to social media and I will start to unfollow certain profiles. Maybe it's influencer where she's promoting these clothes, but I'm finding myself that I don't want to keep spending a lot of money on clothes. I may unfollow that influencer. Um, I may I may keep certain people that I follow, but maybe I will take um, profiles that are a little bit more motivating. And maybe I want some motivation on working out. I'll go to specific profiles that are motivating on encouraging you to get up in the morning and work out. And I'll mark them as favorites, and I'll go to their profile and I'll like a bunch of their images so that the algorithms are showing those at the top of my news feed versus all the ones that I have been comparing myself to. And it's a way of taking control of the algorithms that has had control of our mind for a long time.
I love that you just shared that because I have been doing the same thing, that I will follow certain profiles, and I think we have more control over certain things than we think. And
Mhm.
it's like not letting other things influence us. And when we're in that point, like you said, where you're like second guessing yourself, or there's those negative thoughts, those negative feelings, changing the channel. That's great. I think that mindset shift is what we have to do, and regaining that control. Like you said, you have the tools to do it when you fall in that bad path. It's not productive.
No.
And then thinking about, I always like to talk about that I'm a strengths-based coach, and one of the exercises you just shared that you did a little earlier in our conversation was about the Facebook thing where you're like, can you share 3 words to describe me? I love that exercise. I do that with my students while I ask them, interview other people to learn more about your strengths. Because sometimes other people will know more about our strengths and we claim them on our own. And so I think that's such a powerful exercise. And so whenever I fall in the trap of the comparison kind of game, I always remind myself, like, I'm unique, have a different voice, have a different, I have different skill set, different strengths that I bring to this world, and just having to embrace that and not compare my gifts to somebody else's gifts. And that we all have our unique legacy and what we want to bring and the impact that we want to have. So I think that's such a great reminder for people when they kind of fall in that comparison trap. That's really helpful.
When you say also unique strengths, sometimes we forget. We'll say, "Oh, I'm not unique. Oh, I didn't know that that was a strength of mine." Because it's natural to you. So when
Mhm.
people would tell me, "Wow, you're really resilient, you're really gritty," I was like, really? I don't really see myself that way. Well, it's because it is a strength of mine and it does come more naturally to me,
Yep.
not to other people. And so it's valuable, like you said, reach out to other people. They're going to see things in you of like, wow, I admire that about you. I wish I had a little bit of that trait. And on the same end, there are certain traits that I look at other people and I'll say, wow, that person is just very. I talked to somebody today. I said, I really liked the way that your style of writing on something. I said, I wish I had that creativity like that. And she goes, really? I was like, yeah, it was a strength of her that she didn't even know that I saw in her. And it's the same that maybe we don't see in ourselves because it just comes so natural to us. So don't discredit your strengths because it just comes natural to you. Use that and say, how can I take this strength and apply it to a greater purpose?
So as you were talking and you shared about how you were able to let that person know of that strength and that you admire their writing abilities, I'm going to take this moment to encourage those listening today that if they have a friend, a colleague, or someone that maybe did something or that they know that they have this great strength, I challenge my listeners to reach out to that person. So just kind of how you did, Danielle, and acknowledge that strength. I think it'll make that person feel better, but I think it makes you feel good too to like empower somebody else. I think it's such a nice gift to give somebody that may need it without even you knowing that they may need that boost of confidence. I'm gonna challenge myself too, and I'm gonna do that today. I'm gonna reach out to someone and let them know how great they are. But I really appreciate that thought. Uh, Now, in your book, what would you say is the most important message or takeaway that you would, hope readers would take away from?
I hope that readers, when they're reading the book, that they will see themselves in one of the stories. I share so many stories, not only of my own experience, but what I've seen in the corporate world, what I've seen with some of the success stories of my clients. My hope is that they see themselves in this book. And when reading it, there's not only just these stories that they can relate to, but they're provided the tools to help them. So maybe there's a particular chapter on what success looks like for them. And there's tools in there to help them walk through the steps on how they can redefine success for them. So I'm hoping that this is a book where people read it, they apply it, and it transforms their life so that they can show up and be the best person that they can be and bring joy to themselves and others.
Yes. And when does your book come out? Exactly the date?
February 21st.
February 21st. So people put it on your list. I'm gonna add it to my queue on my Audible. Or no, actually on my Amazon. I want to read it because I know you have exercises in there, and
Mhm.
I like to highlight things. So that's gonna be more of that kind of book. I can already feel it based on our
I
conversation.
agree with you. So I read a lot. I listen to a lot of Audible books because I'm always on the go.
Yep.
But I do believe that there are some books that I'll listen to the Audible, but I'll buy the book itself because of the activities that are in there. And then I'll go back and every once in a while, maybe it's the vision board. I'm creating goals for the beginning of the year. I'll go back to the book and I'll look at it. So, and when people pre-order the book, they get a free courageous goal setting guide. So they get a free guide that they can download. And then they also get a sneak peek into the whole book launch as well.
Super cool. I think the timing is perfect. Like the beginning of the year, I think that's when we're all really rethinking and setting these big goals. So it's a great way to begin the year and be motivated to pursue the things that we want to for the year and onward. Uh, Fantastic. Okay, one more thing. You are the host of the Unstoppable Grit podcast. I would really like to promote and highlight the podcast, but those who maybe haven't tuned in yet, what should listeners expect from your show?
Oh, so we are a couple years in now. So we've got over 150 episodes, and the podcast is now rated top 5% in the world. So excited to share
Congrats.
that. Thanks. Had amazing guests, but what they'll find in each episode is they're going to hear real stories from people that are going to be vulnerable, authentic, genuine, and they're going to talk about the challenges that they've gone through in life and what steps they took to overcome it so that other people can experience, can have the tools to help them thrive personally and professionally. So I've had some amazing guests from all over the world who have joined some of the top authors in the world, and it's such a journey to hear their stories. I'm always fascinated by people's stories, so that's really what sparked it. But yeah, Unstoppable Grit podcast with Danielle Cobo.
I highly recommend it. I've tuned in and I 100% agree. It is definitely very inspiring and you have some great guests and I love the storytelling. I'm a storyteller and just like you, I love inviting people to the podcast to share their stories like just like you today. The vulnerability and just your messaging and your childhood and the person that that you've become today and the impact that you are uh giving back. It's incredible. So thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing your story and your gifts with my listeners today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation, and it's been an honor to join the podcast.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to reading your book and that we continue to stay connected.